Hopefully others will be joining.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing these rolling slides. And I want to welcome you to this Denver conversation about women on boards in collaboration with 50/50 Women on Boards. We're delighted that you have joined us. We've got a packed agenda with some wonderful VIP panelists and then breakouts with director coaches. I'm Barbara Bauer, and I'm the executive director of Board Bound by the Women's Leadership Foundation. And my friend, colleague, and co-chair, Jolynn, has joined it. Jolynn is chair of Board Bound. So Jolynn, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you all for joining. I'll tell you, this is very close to our heart. Our whole mission is to open more board positions for women, and 50/50 Women on Boards is so focused on that and building national attention and global attention to it. But we're excited here in Colorado that we'll be able to celebrate today any progress that we've made. Some of you have been with us in previous years, and you know that every November we're able to look and say, okay, what progress are we making and where else do we need to go? So today we will accomplish that. Thank you. Betsy Berghammer-Creder has joined us, and she is the CEO of our National 50/50 Women on Boards. Betsy.
Well, that is I. Thank you very much, Jolynn and Barbara, and I'm delighted to be here in Denver. Well, actually, I reside and our company is headquartered in Los Angeles. So, but I love to come to Denver, and what a fantastic city you have and how much growth is going on. It's just so incredible. So I'm Betsy Berghammer-Creder. I'm the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, which is our new name this year, because last year, you remember, and years past in Denver, because Jolynn's been involved with us for many years, we've been 2020 Women on Boards. But when when women achieved 20% of holding the board seats in the Russell 3000 at 20%, then we changed our name to 50/50. So that's our goal, 50%. We don't want to take over all corporate boards. We just want to have as many women on the boards as men in order to make very good business decisions. So no matter how long it takes, though, won't it be great when we can all look back and think of, thinking of an all-male, all-white board is like looking back at a Model T Ford and thinking what an anachronism that is. And in 20, 30 years, that's the way people will feel. So how long is it going to take to get to 50/50? We don't really know, but it could be 10, it could be hopefully fewer years, but with the help of our events, the global conversation on board diversity, and powerful groups like yours in Denver, with the Women's Leadership Foundation, we're going to be able to keep this progress growing. So Denver is one of 30 events that we're putting on under the global conversation of board diversity this month before Thanksgiving. 3 events a day. Yikes, it's working, though. It's working. Today we did Dallas and Sacramento already. Tomorrow's Los Angeles, but Denver is spectacular and really, really important to us. And we are building up to the last day, which will be before the Thanksgiving week break, and that'll be November 19th, when we're going to have our first ever closing celebration after all the 30 events. So I just wanted to mention our overarching theme is leading the way to diverse and gender balanced corporate boards. And we, along with the Women's Leadership Foundation, really are having a positive impact in business as well as on women who really haven't known how to get themselves onto corporate boards, but helping them and women of color and underrepresented groups know what steps to take to get themselves on boards. And now we're no longer, voices in the dark all alone, because we have CalPERS and CalSTRS and New York State Pension Fund and BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and NASDAQ. All of the institutional investors who are, really, really pushing companies to put more women on boards as a good business decision. So, and you also know in Colorado, in California, there's a concerted effort to get more women on boards. And I would hope that Denver women, Colorado women, if you know a CEO in California or other corporate directors, now is the time to reach out to them and just say, hey, I bring excellent career experience, value added experience to boards. And I'd like you to think about me. Because the good news is, and you're going to hear our statistics next from Jolynn, but our national statistic is that women have achieved 25%, just over 25% of all board seats in the Russell 3000. And this is historic, never been this high. But so we're over halfway, sort of over halfway to getting to 50%. And as you may know, that California has shot up to 29% because of the concerted effort to get on board. So I'm really pleased to be here. I thank Jolynn and Barbara for inviting me. And thanks also to the hardworking leadership committee to put on this great event. I'm just glad to be here and I really appreciate all you've done. And I know that all our women and men attendees are going to get a lot of beneficial information from the panel and from the breakout sessions this afternoon. So have a great day. Thanks, Jolynn.
Thank you. You're going to love meeting everyone that is joining us. We have a great group. So Barbara.
Yes, so thank you, Betsy. That was wonderful. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you do get disconnected, just try again the link. We will finish with the panel discussion in about an hour. And then you will be automatically moved to breakout sessions, so you do not have to do anything. We'd really like to encourage you to use the chat room to get acquainted with each other, perhaps share your LinkedIn link with each other, and any insights or comments that you might have. And Jolynn, if you would share your slides, there's a few introductory slides I want to cover before we start the panel. So thank you, first of all, to global sponsors, because it is their work, their support that enables us to do this and collaborate with Betsy and her team. Next slide, Jolynn. More global sponsors. And especially thank you to our local sponsors, Advanced Energy, Foundry Group, and Summit Materials. And we're delighted to get going. I want to thank our Leadership Council. So in your breakout sessions, most of our Leadership Council is with us today. And these are the women who have engaged you and brought you to this event. They'll be in your breakout session, so please get to know them and appreciate the incredible work that they have done. So with that, Jolynn, I'd like to turn it over to you so that we can listen to Colorado's progress and perhaps learn about some challenges that still remain.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, we love looking at the data and seeing exactly where we stand. So Equilar has the Russell 3000 company data is what 50/50 Women on Board uses, and enables us to compare Colorado to other states. So just as Betsy said, nationally, you can see the dark bars here are 2021 and the gray bars are 2020. And in every case, we have more directors, more women directors, and a higher percentage, 25.6%. That is wonderful. Colorado also has made great progress. We have more directors than we did last year, more women directors, and we have improved to 23.9%. We could just round that to 24, huh? And that is great. We are very excited about that, but we do notice that we're 2 percentage points below the national average. And those of us in Colorado think Colorado should be a leader and that this is an area that we would love, with all of your help, to be looking at this next year and say, hey, Colorado is above the national average. So let's keep the work going. Another way that we can slice the data is to look at companies. And we can see that Betsy mentioned the goal is gender balance boards. And if there's an odd number of board members, and we've got 9 board members and 4 of them are women and 5 are men, we still consider that gender balanced, or vice versa. And so 7% of companies have achieved that. And over a third have 3 or more women on their boards. Again, you can see that's great progress this last year. Here in Colorado, here we are at 9% of our Russell 3000 companies have gender balanced boards, which is wonderful. We're not quite as high on our 3 or more women. We're at 22%, but we're moving the needle in the right direction in each of these areas. The other thing that we want to celebrate is the Colorado companies with gender balance board. I mentioned that there were 7 that were in the Russell 3000, and then we have 6 other smaller companies. So if you do work, if you do business with any of these companies, if you're an employee with any of these companies, please congratulate them and thank them for leading the way. Now, besides having gender diversity, of course, we are concerned about, well, what will it take for us to get gender balanced boards? And we're going to need 157 up to 286 more women board directors in Colorado public companies in order to achieve our goal. So we're hoping that many of you that are in the audience today are preparing to step up and to take on these roles and to take advantage of your executive experience and apply it. And if you're not personally, we still want your help, because we need advocates. We need people that care and that are raising the issue and discussing it. So thank you for helping on this. And besides wanting gender diversity, we would like to have racial diversity. One of the things that Equilar is doing is asking people to declare their ethnicity. So far, only 17% of the board directors have declared. So if you are one of those board directors that haven't yet declared, I think we're going to put in the chat a link where you can claim your profile on Equilar. But we do have some data to look at, and we can see that about 11% of all directors of the Russell 3000 companies are people of color, with about 7% men and 4% women. Another way we can look at this, and this is a different slice of the data. This is looking just at Fortune 500 companies, the very largest companies. And you can see that we need 2 to 2.5 times as many white, African American, and Asian women to be in proportion with the population. But we're going to need 3 times as many Latino men and 9 times as many Latinas on boards in order to be in proportion. So that is one reason why we are excited to have Latinas in the boardroom as a Colorado initiative to be sure that we're able to help bridge that gap. So this basically is sharing just some of the information, so we all have a common set of data. But what we're really looking forward to is hearing from the CEOs and board directors who are joining us, because they can give us the insight and the real world experience. So I would like to invite our panelists at this time. So Mary Beth Vitale is the CEO of Polera and a board director of Lunar Innovations and GEA, GEHA, and many other public and private companies. Paul Cesarek is president and CEO and board chair of CoreSite, He also has served as the director of 2 publicly traded real estate companies. Rhonda Wallen is Chief Strategy Officer and EVP of Carasyntac and Board Director of Exobionics and Boulder Community Health. Eric Donnelly is CEO and Board Director of Crossroads Systems and a Board Director of InBank Shares, that's headquartered here in Colorado. Hi, welcome. Good to have you all. Well, Mary Beth, since you have served on so many public and private company boards, I thought maybe we could start at the very beginning and just say, what are the responsibilities of boards of directors and why are they so important?
Great. I'm glad to do that. It's something that's dear to my heart when it comes to the responsibilities. And whenever I deliver kind of this message, I kind of try to put it in buckets, and I put it in 3 pillars. So the number one responsibility of the board is to hire, fire, compensate, evaluate, and make sure there's a successor of the CEO. So if you do not get that right, the other 2 responsibilities really can't happen. So the CEO is the number one. They are the leader of the organization. They set the culture. It goes down through the organization. So you want to get that right. Number 2 is strategy. And management, does the heavy lifting. They'll bring you the strategic initiatives that they think for the next 3 years or the next year, depending on the industry. And they will say, this is what we think is the best way to get there, and a budget is behind it. The board, however, has the final responsibility of strategy, and why it's so important for them to not just rely on asymmetrical information from management, to be exposed to lots of different areas of that particular industry, to understand and to be able to ask really solid questions of the strategy to the CEO and management team, saying, did you consider this? And if not, why? So if you had an organic growth strategy, you would ask the question, why didn't you look at M&A? And they may have a great valid reason for that, but we need to, as board members, to challenge what other opportunities could be out there strategically, because strategically is your strategy is going to give you the competitive advantage. And given the fact that everything is so dynamic, moving so quickly, you really have to be able to do that. Lastly, in terms of responsibility, I'm going to encompass it all in risk, and that includes compliance risk, financial risk, your cyber risk, regulatory, all of those things. And you need to make sure that the organization is doing it right. And I would say ensure that is done right. And when I talk about those responsibilities, when a board member has the responsibility for oversight, but when it comes to a crisis in any of those 3 pillars, it's all hands on deck. And this really means the time commitment is extremely large at that point, and that's when you have to step in. So if you had to fire the CEO, or a CEO moved to another company, or a death, all hands on deck. If you were Blockbuster and you saw Netflix and you didn't pay attention and it took away your business in a matter of a couple of years, all hands on deck. And lastly, if you had a cyber breach like Equifax did, it took them 3+ years to recover their stock price because of not doing the right things to mitigate risk. So those are about the 3 main pillars of what the responsibilities of the board.
Super. Thank you, Mary Beth. Now, Paul, we're very proud of CoreSite because you're one of those top 22% of companies that have 3 or more women on the boards. We're just interested in the story. How did that come about? How did you find the people that really would add value to your board?
So about 3 or 4 years after IPO, as we were looking at good practices of board refreshment, we made it. We knew we needed to get more diversity on our board, for the reason that without it, we just weren't getting all the talent we could possibly achieve for a board. And we pursued it the way you would going after talent for any other very high level position in a company. Mary Beth did a great job of explaining the types of responsibilities. And so you really need great talent. We used for 3/4 of our female and minority board recruitments, we've used recruiters with one person coming from networking. Now, when you're working with recruiters, you know, you have to be very proactive with them, especially when we were starting this process out in 2015. We came public in 2010. You know, the most recruiting firms initially have kind of the stable of candidates that they've been collecting for a while, and the most efficient way to earn a buck is to, and they're all very capable people with a lot of experience, but to place one of them, you know, in a new opportunity. And so you have to sit down with them and say, no, here's how wide we want you to cast the net. And you know, we want to make sure we're seeing candidates across all gender, across the, you know, gender spectrum, race spectrum, minority spectrum. You know, we want to see a full slate of talent, and you have to make that a priority. I think nowadays most of them are more or less doing that automatically, but you know, 5, 6 years ago that was not always the case. But you also have to be you have to open up the funnel a bit. There's a lot of books out there on boards, including some written by women who kind of prioritize, you know, having former CEOs or CFOs on your board. And I know we'll cover that later in the panel. But you know, we decided, you know, that there are many people with big responsibilities in bigger companies that would be a great fit for a board of a company like ours. And so again, you're broadening the net and making sure that you're not being narrow-minded about where you find talent. It worked out exceptionally well for us. I mean, our first female board member, Kelly Chambliss, was you know, a regional director of global business services for IBM at the time she came on our board. She is now in their senior leadership team, senior vice president of Americas and strategic sales for IBM Global Business Services, and she's been a fabulous board member. You know, Jean Bua is another example. And Kelly heads our nomination and corporate governance committee right now. Jean heads our audit committee, is the chair of our audit committee. Initially, she didn't screen, you know, high because she was the CFO of a relatively small public company. But as we dug deeper, we saw that, oh, by the way, she'd been the chief accounting officer of a $150 billion public company. So, you know, we opened up the funnel to make sure we weren't missing talent, and Jean's been fabulous. And then our third female director then came to us through networking, and you know, business and industry expertise is great. And Patricia Higgins is the only woman who's ever had my type of job as a CEO of a publicly traded data center company. And so, you know, I think we were attractive to her. You know, again, the more diverse your talent group is, the more diverse talent is attracted to you. And so we mutually came together, and she joined our board. And so that was our story of how we got to diversity. You know, and that's the practice that we will follow every time we go through board refreshment and rotation. We've had 3 board directors roll off, so we've increased the board in that process from 7 to 9. But have added 4 new directors and had 2 roll off.
Wow, it sounds like you were really strategic when you thought through what you needed and made it happen. Thanks. You know, Rhonda, Paul was just mentioning about a lot of boards, the first thing they say, oh, is we need CEOs and we need CFOs. But if you're putting together a team, often you need lots of different talents. You have bioscience and a scientific background, and I just wondered how does that skill help you when you're on the board and are adding value to the boards that you serve?
Sure. So I think being trained as a scientist gives you a certain approach to problem solving and a certain disciplined way of thinking, which is which is always a plus on a board, particularly as companies are growing and they're facing a lot of different strategic decisions about, which way should they go and what should their strategy be. I think when you are a technologist, it gives you the ability in a technology company anyway, not consumer companies or companies outside your industry, but within your industry, having that scientific background gives you the ability to Mary Beth's prior point of really understanding different strategic choices. What is feasible? What are some other options that this technology can do that maybe we haven't considered? Maybe we need to narrow down the set of choices because of the way the technology is, you can't make it at scale, for example. And these types of informed, I guess, areas of expertise can really help to help you pressure test different strategies that the company may have. It gives you the ability to ask very informed questions when you are reviewing the plans, the milestones, what the company intends to do. So I think from that perspective, having a technical background is very useful for companies who are technology based. In my case, I was able to bring that, but also the CEO perspective, as I was also a founder of a biotech company. So understanding some of the challenges that early stage companies face is also something that I was able to leverage, having walked in the shoes of some of the CEOs that I've been on the boards with.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us more about the board that you are on. What does it do?
So I'm on two boards. So the hospital board obviously is in healthcare, and we work very deeply in both ambulatory and in hospital care. So I think my technical background comes in some of the time when we're looking at, for example, how do we augment different service lines with new medical products? What kinds of technologies can we bring in that we can market to the public as patients are becoming more consumers? Helping them to understand kind of from the medical industry point of view, what would be involved in training the physician staff or supporting that product. What kinds of campaigns have the medical device manufacturers undertaken to the consumers that would also then help to attract consumers to hospitals that have their devices. So just kind of that industry knowledge about the medical and biotech industry as far as new products, new drugs. But really, I guess another aspect that is relevant from their point of view, as far as I'm concerned, is really just the experience of being able to look very critically at what are the strategic directions that we could take and how do we evaluate where we should go. So part of that is just strategy training and being able to look at strategic decisions from an investor point of view, which is a role that I've played before. Being able to understand what are the right questions to ask as you evaluate different strategic choices. So that's on the hospital side. On the public company side, I am a director of a small public medical device company. And as I said before, understanding the technical background of medical product development has been very useful. Really just challenging some of the assumptions that the team makes about, for example, how long it will take to bring out a new version of this product. Being able to challenge, do we make another iteration of this product, or do we acquire a product line from somebody who is already on market, right? So again, to Mary Beth's point, like they're being able to think and ask those strategic questions and challenge the plans that you're being presented is a good skill to have.
Excellent, thank you. So Eric, tell us about yourself, because one of the things that I noticed is that you've spent a lot of your career helping low and moderate income communities and prosper through home ownership. And also I noticed that your company is a B Corporation. So what inspired you to go after that B Corporation, and does that have a relationship to your commitment to diversity and equity?
Well, thanks, Jillian, and thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here. So to answer your first question, I grew up in Houston. My mother's Costa Rican, my father's Colombian. I grew up in a really loud, Latin, fun home. We spoke Spanish. I was the different kid whose mother had a thick accent. And you know, growing up in the 80s in Houston isn't what it is today, because it's a much more international city than it was then. And so as a family, we always gravitated to supporting. My father was very heavily involved with Hispanic businesses in Houston. And so it was just in my blood. And when I had an opportunity to work for the company that I subsequently bought and is now public, the company was buying and renovating homes in low to moderate income areas of Texas, predominantly Hispanic. Most of the people that work for us are Hispanic. 99% of the borrowers who borrow from us are Hispanic. So it was really a cultural labor of love for me, and that was an easy decision. And then when we decided to go down the path of becoming a certified community development financial institution, a CDFI. Another tangential route that we went down was to get our B Corporation certification. And everything that we do is around impact. Our CDFI community in one way or the other is about impact, whether it's making small business loans or providing mezzanine capital or payday equivalent loans that are much lower rates than what you see on the street. We're all moved and motivated by helping minorities, helping low to moderate income communities. It happens that we do both. And so the B Corporation certification was really, I mean, neither of these two certifications required us to change what we were doing. It was already ingrained in our DNA as an impact business. Really, the founder 30 years ago, and then I just sort of took it to where it is today. But it did bring, the B Corporation piece of it brought an ecosystem of vendors that made it much easier for us to find minority and female-owned businesses. So for example, when we decided to renovate our website, it was a woman-led and owned IT company in California. And so it's an incredible community of for-profit entities that are doing well by doing good. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to champion, as it now we were the first publicly traded community development financial institution that wasn't a bank, is to really say you can be out in communities, you can do well by doing good, you can build shareholder value and deliver impact to communities. And then we can get really intentional about how we make our board. And you know, our board at Crossroads has a great mix of minorities and women. Our board at InBank, thank you for acknowledging our home base in Denver. We're proud to say a wonderful woman has just accepted to come on board with us. So that'll be now our second woman on the board, the woman that heads our compensation and governance committee as a woman. So it's wonderful to be a director at this time in our country and culturally where we are, and just being aware. And as the father of two girls, it's, you know, I'm constantly even walking into a hotel the other day, the woman that was taking us around said, "Wouldn't you like this as your view?" to me. And my wife, later said, "You're supposed to jump in and say it could be her office too." And, so it's about like my awareness being heightened and really walking this walk of equality and not just talking about it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Well, Paul, one of the things that we've talked about is that we're glad that we've got over 20% of women on board positions. But when we looked at named executive officers of Colorado public companies, we only had 16%. And that's the pipeline for future board directors. So I would love your thoughts on, first of all, what's going on with CoreSite on that, but also what can we do? What advice might you give to your fellow CEOs and board directors about that preparing the pipeline?
Well, there's a lot of different things people can do, but I'll try to hit on the high points. We're 30. Our senior leadership team is 30% female, and I think the same principles about director recruiting apply there, but with a bit more internal checks and balances to make sure no talent's being overlooked. So yes, when you recruit, and of our 3 female SLT members, 2 organically grew up with the company and 1 was recruited from the outside. So whatever I said about recruiting from the outside for directors, same thing applies for recruiting any executive position. You want to make sure you spread the net wide, and even in terms of setting qualifications, be a bit more open-minded about the type of people that could really do a good job in an executive role. But internally, one of our core company values is fair and equal treatment. And the way that we implement that is our HR team, and I believe our head of HR, VP of HR, Leslie McIntosh, who is on our SLT, is in the audience here. One of their responsibilities is frankly to test for bias and to proactively help managers and leaders do succession planning. And the goal of that is to make sure that there is no talent that's overlooked. Now, the good news story here is that if I had done this in a company 20 years ago, the first time you did that test, you look around and say, well, why is she not next in line for that VP position? And I think that's more of a rarity right now that somebody is overlooked. But you have to make sure you've got to proactively go out there and not wait for people to raise their hands. And your best source of talent is your internal talent. So you got to identify them. You got to give them bridges to advance. You have to give them training and career opportunities. But then as you're doing it, you need to, and look, I'm doing this for the benefit of the best executive team at CoreSite. It's just a derivative that we're also creating good future board candidates or current board candidates. But you need to make sure that you're growing people into decisions where they have real responsibility, which means they have a very real opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
Because that's the sort of, if your people are recruiting board members and somebody's kind of had a staff advisory position, they may have great technical expertise, but if somebody else, regardless of gender or race, has actually had big responsibilities for decisions that they've had to live with or fail with, that's going to resonate more with who do you want on this group of people, as Mary Beth said, who are going to help the CEO make good strategic decisions and hire and fire the CEO, which is a big decision. So, that's, as you're developing all of your talent, that's what you want to give people when they get to these senior executive positions. And we do have some of our team is already getting recruited for boards, and that's great. But I think that they'll stand up well because they have real You know, they have real responsibility and a real opportunity to fail. And that's the type of experience that really sets them up to be good directors in the future, in addition to all the other expertise.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for really being a role model on that. Well, there are a lot of people that have gotten that executive experience, have been entrepreneurial, but they're not on boards. So I'm just wondering how that happened for you. Was that something you consciously sought after? Did others seek you? But how did you get on that first board and then the next one?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, are you asking me?
Yeah.
Should I go or?
No, I'm sorry, Rhonda, please.
Okay. So one of my favorite sayings is opportunity favors the prepared. And I knew when I had been on nonprofit boards that I did want to kind of advance, I guess, in a way, and look at some more kind of high profile, certainly compensated positions, and look towards the public company arena. So I started networking, and I started talking to people who I knew were on boards. I went on a couple of advisory board positions, which I encourage everyone to think about as a pathway. A lot of people start with nonprofit. I think that's great as well. Why advisory was good for me was because you get to see a lot of very critical decisions. Again, that's talking about how the company is going to compete in the market. How are they going to grow? Right? These are big questions that usually advisors can use their either business experience or subject matter expertise to weigh in on. And so it gives you, not exactly the fiduciary and the governing experience, but certainly the oversight and advising experience that a lot of board roles require. So I was thinking along these lines. I was advised to prepare a board bio, which everyone should do, and it's not the same as your resume. And you really need to think about, harken back to what Mary Beth said about, the key responsibilities of a board. It's really not about can you, fill in for any of management, or do you have the same sort of skills as management? It's really about how do you bring your industry skills to bear on the direction of the company and the oversight of the company. So so I prepared a board bio that is, like I said, very distinct from a resume. And I just started letting people know. I said, I've got this great experience as, a nonprofit board member. I've advised companies. I've been observer board director. Because in my case, I had a bit of a step up because as a venture investor, which is part of my background, I sat on boards then. So that I'm sure helped a lot. But I wasn't recruited specifically because of my networking or my board bio. I was recruited because of my networking. And I had been telling people, I'm really interested and this is what I think I can bring. And it turns out that a friend of mine that we were both at the same medical device company 20 years ago, we had, kind of post kids gotten back in touch. You come up for air after years of motherhood and career and not having time for anything else outside those two things. And we got reconnected and she said, I think somebody I know of is looking for a board member. Let me check. And she did. And it turns out the person that was looking was a mutual friend of ours, actually someone who was across the negotiating table from me when I was working on deals for this med tech company 20 years ago. And he remembered me and he said, yes, Rhonda would be great. So, just keep up your old networks. You never know, right? You never know who's going to need someone or where people might need your skills and when. So keep up your network.
That's great. Great tips. Thanks. So Eric, I understand you're part of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. And you saw
We were
we
actually
shared
having
some-
our conference yesterday and today, as a matter of fact, discussing many of these topics.
Oh, really? Wonderful. Was it virtual?
It was.
Well, good. I'm glad you were able to be with us too. That's great. But when we looked at the fact that we need like 9 times as many Latinas, we need many more Latino men too. But how do you feel like we can best bridge that gap?
That's a tall order, and we had a lot of people over the last couple of days looking at the demographic shifts in this country. I mean, we're in Texas, our business is in Texas, so it's almost, we're getting close to 50% of the population. So it's a big lift, and it requires a lot of advocacy. It requires those of us that can talk about it and do something about it to champion cause. Like my opinion is, and when I'm talking to people who are putting boards together, I mainly talk to people putting bank boards together, but I encourage them, and we do this ourselves, to create a board that is reflective of the communities that we live in and that we're serving. And so, if you take somebody in Dallas, for example, that I talked to a couple of weeks ago, wanting to put a bank together, I said, that ought to look, half the board ought to be Hispanic or some community of color, right? And you have a lot of, and be reflective of the women and male demographic. And so, there's probably a cultural piece of this too, where we as Latino men have a real duty to empower more Latino women, right? And not just hold on to the decades old mantras and ways that we've always done things, and rethink the way households are run and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a little deeper, at least in the Hispanic community, just because some of these things are so ingrained. But I go back to the original response, which is really, we need to be advocates for our community, and we need to help promote. Like, I got asked to serve on a board the other day, and I deferred to a Hispanic woman who works for us and said, I think that it would be a better opportunity for her. Not that I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but that's the kind of stuff that we've all got to do when we have, because I feel like a lot of us are the ones who get the requests over and over. And if we're not advocating, as Paul was saying, for the next level of executives and board members, then we're not doing right by all of this. So yeah, it's a big lift though. It really is, specifically to Latinas on bank boards. I mean, I feel like we're sort of at ground zero on this.
Well, great. I'm sure that all of your work and all of the work we can do, we're hoping will make a big difference.
Thank you.
So,
Well,
Mary
just to be
Beth,
practical, everybody send their Latino women, qualified or even semi-qualified board people to Eric. Let's just
Please.
close out that
Let's
loop.
do it. I love it. Thank you.
That's a great idea, Rhonda.
Yes.
And I've heard that if a woman is going to run for a public office, she has to be asked like 5 times before she really goes for it. I think the other thing is just encouraging each other. And I see, Liz, you have already put into the chat. Stepping up. Thank you. But
Email Liz.
yeah. So we'll share Liz's information with you, Eric. But that is something that I think all of us can do, is not only recommend at the right time, but also personally encourage people to go after those goals. Oh, well, now, Mary Beth, you have been on many, you maybe you could tell us how many corporate boards at this point, and you also are a faculty member of the National Association of Corporate Directors. So that is a wonderful background. But one of the things that you've got here is a lot of executive women that have great experience, but may not be on a board yet. So I wondered what tips you might have that you could share with us.
Sure, glad to do that. Yeah, I've served on 9 corporate boards, currently serve on 3 right now since 1998. Some of them lasted quite some time, and mainly public boards, and 7 of them I was the only woman that had ever been on the board. Some of the other ones we had more women on it, and I think Rhonda gave a lot of great examples that I would say of how you get on a board. That is really how it happens. But I think giving a little more, I've been chair of the NomGov committee for many boards, and usually best practices are the committee puts together a skills matrix of the skills they need given the strategy. So a lot of times when you're searching for, you don't know that is going on. And so if the strategy, I give the example of M&A, and you have nobody on your board that has ever completed an M&A transaction, either in their day job or as a board member, that may be a difficult strategy to achieve if you don't have those skills on the board. So we would go out to look for somebody that has those skill sets. I think it's important to know that being on a board of directors is not just an afterthought. It's not just to show up 4 times a year. This is real work. I mean, so if you have a day job, it's like one board. You could really, a corporate board, you may be able to do some nonprofit because you're flexible in terms of whether you show up for that one meeting or not. That's not the case with a corporate board. And if you are retired, or this is what you do for a living, is serving on boards of directors, 3 or 4 is about it, just because of scheduling. And once a crisis happens, which they always do, don't assume that there will never be a crisis. So I think some of the tips are going to align with what Rhonda had spoken about. But first of all, you really need to figure out what value do you bring. So what is it that a board will want you? Not just because you've had this job and you were a senior leader or a CEO, if you were, or a CFO, whatever. That doesn't check the box. But what brings you? Why are you special? So a lot of times I get, since people know, especially in Colorado, that I've served on a lot of boards and that I'm connected in the board community. And so I'll get a phone call from somebody I haven't heard from in 20 years and saying, can we have coffee? I know exactly what they want. They want to, get on a board. And the first thing they say to me is, well, I'm going to retire in about 2 years or a year and a half. And this would be really good for me and be intellectually stimulating for me to go on a board. I immediately write that person off. I will never, it's not what's good for you. It's what's good for the company and what you can do for the shareholders or stakeholders in terms of that. So to kind of see like what the tips are. 1, yes, board resume, different than your job resume. If you still have a job, you should always have it aligned with your LinkedIn page. The LinkedIn page should look very similar to the board resume in terms of the points that you make, so that you have meta tags in there for keywords in terms of that. However, if you have a day job, it's kind of hard. You've got to have to balance it out, but you still need to make sure that's aligned. So, whatever the number is, I usually quote 85% of boards are you get on a board because you've been networking. The other is through search firms. Now, search firms may claim a few more than that percentage because maybe a board gets to the final 2 candidates that they have through that network. They'll let a search firm do background checks, make sure it aligns with the skill sets they have on there. So I think the other thing that I would recommend is always say yes. Always say yes to things. And I live by this, just for the mere fact I am here. I am chair of a board that's in a crisis right now. And believe me, this is taking some time up, but I always say yes for this because you never know what you'll learn, what you'll gain from. And I give you an example. KPMG does a lot of seminars, and I'll always say, yes, I'll go to them. And I happened to meet a woman there at one of their seminars who 3-4 years later, and this was now about a year ago, I was specifically, I'm chair of a NomGov committee, their technology company, publicly traded on the East Coast. And we really were looking for somebody with capital markets expertise and a woman and a Black woman. So my network, it was a harder network. I went through a lot of different groups, ELC, and I went through women corporate directors, all of that. Well, lo and behold, the woman I know, who was a member of women corporate directors at the time, or still is, was there, and she was at KPMG, and I got to know her, and I cultivated that, and lo and behold, after interviewing and all that, she's now on our board, and I'm no longer the only woman on that board. So I would recommend say yes to everything, know what your value is, and know that the people that are the decision makers are the CEO, chair of the NomGov, and the NomGov committee are going to make the decisions of who is the next board member. And last, what I'm going to leave you with is what not to do. First of all, don't do what the guy did, calling me up saying this is going to be good for him. 2, don't jump at the first board opportunity. May not be the right one for you. And make sure that you don't not do your due diligence, and making sure you talk with the auditors, do your research, make sure it's a solid company, make sure they have D&O insurance, all of those basic things. Most companies do that. And make sure, just like Eric said, the bank board I had served on, it was a large financial holding company, and we sold it to a much, much, much larger company. And as soon as that was sold, I was getting calls like crazy from financial institutions, all banks mainly. And I got one that I got close and was offered the position, a very small bank, much smaller, and it would eliminate me from going on a publicly traded bank. And I immediately said, look, I'm not the person for you. Let me suggest somebody this would be her first job, her first board member job. And I recommended her, and lo and behold, that worked out. So you've got to advocate for others too. You have to advocate for the people that are of color, people of gender, and again, when it comes to search firms, one other thing I'll leave you with is that, and Paul talked about it, most search firms will give you a diverse slate. You'll know who is a woman by the name, most likely, on that. You may not know if it's a person of color, but what ended up happening a lot of times when you have maybe all male board or all white board, that those people don't even get interviewed. So when you're using a search firm, they know who is a person of color by the name, or they've talked to them. And I implemented the Rooney Rule. You interview them. If they've got the qualities and the capabilities on paper, interview them, because you may not know. Don't automatically, it's unaware bias that they end up getting eliminated. Even though the search firm did a good job of putting them on the list, they'll narrow it down to the top 2, and they're white males that they interview. So you have to really make sure you're purposeful when you're in the NomGov committee in terms of that. And if you're on a board and you're a woman or you're a person of color, chair the NomGov committee. You can then have an impact and affect it.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you all very much. I guess I would like to ask if there are any final thoughts from our panelists. Paul, I start with you.
Just following up on what Mary Beth said, I would encourage people to reach out to the recruiting firms, get them their board bios, advocate for themselves. You really want to be in that funnel as opposed to trying to do it solely independently or through networking.
Great. So it sounds like do both.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
do both. But don't leave the search firms out of it. They're still the major funnel for most of this recruitment.
Great. Rhonda, any final thoughts?
You know, I think one of the other things that is useful, maybe to give you guys a plug, is organizations such as yourselves who have board readiness programs. I think it's a nice add to someone's board bio to show that they've been very intentional about how they are preparing themselves for board service. Because it's not, there are certain aspects of it that are not going to come just because you've been an executive, right? There are, especially on a public board, there's all kinds of regulations and, you know, SOX requirements and, you know, all kinds of things which it's great to be aware of. So if you can find a board preparedness program, it's also a good place to network, actually, because, you know, after that, presumably people are getting placed and you can only have so many positions, right? So if you know people that you went through a cohort with, you can call them up and say, hey, you know, I got a call for this. It's not great for me, but you might, you know, I can introduce you, right? So I think there's many of these programs. I obviously love Boardbound, but I think they're worth it, especially if your official board service is a little light. It shows intentionality on your part and preparedness.
Thanks, Rhonda. Eric, any final thoughts?
I'm just inspired by the fellow panelists, and I think I'm going to leave here with Mary Beth in my ear saying, say yes to everything. So I love it. You're right. I mean, we should say yes, and we should always take a conversation, and we should not be afraid to put ourselves out there. So I think it's such great advice.
Thanks. Mary Beth?
The other thing I would think of, if you've not served on a board before, make sure you do get on a nonprofit board, because I think, and if you are on that nonprofit board, get on the executive committee, because the experience you'll have in the executive committee can help populate your board resume. You could talk about, well, you know, if you had to let go of the executive director, how you had to do it. Very similar to the CEO. Go back to what the responsibilities of a board member is. If you had financial crisis, you had to raise funds or get a loan to make sure the entity was still viable. Very similar to what, you know, a board would do. So I would recommend that if you don't have any other opportunities to be an advisor like Rhonda was able. She was a venture advisor, investor advisor. So those things obviously help. But if you don't have that ability, then I think, you know, definitely you could do it and make sure that you fit it in the way that it applies to what the board's roles are for corporate boards.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. We so appreciate you being with us. And we have another important part of our program coming up. And so I guess I will ask Barbara to talk about our breakout sessions.
So thank you so much to the panelists. So many gems to capture. Mary Beth, say yes. Rhonda, opportunity favors the prepared. And of course, with corporate board bound and community board bound, our programs, that should be our tagline. We are transitioning now to the breakout sessions. And so I'm going to share my screen because I want to bring up a photo of our wonderful director coaches. You've already met Mary Beth and Rhonda, the two on the left, but we will also have Gloria, who's on our board, Jane, who's an alum for us, Liz, who supports the Latinas Committee, Brett is on our board and is also a mentor. Charity is on our board and also a mentor and a grad of the program. And Bernie is a mentor for us as well. So there's nothing any of you need to do. In just a second, Laura's going to hit a button and you will be magically transported. If for some reason you get disconnected, then just log back into the original Zoom link and we'll support you getting to the right place. We have about 40 or 50 minutes, and while you're in the breakout sessions, we'll send a 10-minute warning. And then there will be a message that in 1 minute, your breakout room will close before you all come back together. Because we have the advantage of having Betsy with us, she's going to drop in on some of the breakout sessions. And so please make her welcome and have her join the conversation. We're thrilled she's able to do that. So without more talking, Laura, can you send everyone to the breakout sessions? There they go.
And Betsy, which breakout would you like to be in first?
Thanks for asking. I will probably say hello to Bernie. I know her, and I'm just going to be, don't push me yet. I need to take a restroom break. I've been on this chair since Dallas at 8 o'clock this morning. All right.
Okay.
But I'll come right back here.
Great.
You can push me. Thank you, Barb. Good. Thank you, Jolynn. Barbara, I think it was excellent. And the panel was all insightful and engaged. So what did you think? You like it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was great. Now,
really.
we have a couple of people that need to join a breakout group, it looks like.
They've been assigned. They just need to accept the notice that came to
Okay.
them.
Good, good, good. I'll be right back.
Thanks,
All right,
Betsy.
Betsy.
See, Mary Smith.
So Laura, I'll join one of the groups. Mary, do you want to join a group?
Oh, sure.
So let's see.
April, can you hear us?
See, Mary Smith should.
And Melanie, are you there? So Laura, do we have one of the groups that have fewer people?
A couple of them, yes. The one with the smallest would be Charities. And well, Charity and Brett's are both have smaller rooms.
Okay, so,
Then I would put Melanie, April needs to go to an executive one, but she's been assigned, right?
Yeah, they've all been assigned. Melanie and April need to accept.
Okay, there
Oh.
they go.
and how many people does Mary Beth have in her room?
Room 6 is down to 3 people, so I would say we definitely need someone there.
Or maybe combine them. Room 6 is,
And have we turned the recording off?
Let me turn the recording off. I apologize.
What,
All
what,
right.
what small town in Ohio, Brett?
It's a little town called Granville.
Oh, I know that. My sister lives there.
You're kidding.
I never know. Yeah,
That's
crazy.
funny.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I gather that the breakout sessions were helpful and interesting, and that you have some good thoughts about how to help your own journey.
I'm on this thing and
I'm going to start a screen share here because we're wrapping up. And so thank you to our global sponsors again. They are the companies and organizations that make all of the work that Betsy and her team and our partners like us in Denver and elsewhere possible.
Excellent.
And especially thank you to our local sponsors, Advanced Energy, Foundry Group, and Summit Materials. We were delighted to have them. Now, because of course we're immersed in corporate and community board bound, I can't let you get away without a bit of follow-up homework engagement. So we want you to continue thinking about what you've learned today, what you heard today. Please continue the conversation, reach out, engage with us in Denver, get involved with 50/50's national organization. and connect with 50/50 by signing up for their newsletter. We will include you in our newsletter as well, because we want you to stay engaged and active. And a big thank you to the National 50/50 team. Betsy, you and your team are awesome.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you, Jolynn. Great.
To the Leadership Council, because you brought everyone to this event, and we just wouldn't have had an event without you. VIP panelists were excellent. And a big thank you to the director coaches.
Great.
And a special thank you to all of you, because we need, you remember Jolynn's numbers. We need between 150 and 250 women for boards in Colorado, not to mention California and all across the country.
Right.
So you need to reach out to other colleagues, friends, get them involved, explore our programs, Betsy's programs, because they're there to help you. We want this group of women, you, to become clear about what kind of board journey you personally want and where do you want to end up. So with that, I hope you all stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful holiday season coming up. Please stay in touch with us.
Could I just add, Barbara, and that all of you, because you're registered, are invited and welcome to come to the closing celebration after all 30 events are finished. I got 27 yet to go. All 30 events, and it'll be Friday, November 19th, virtual, of course, from 1 to 3 Central. So I think that's noon to 2. I mean, it's only 1 hour. 1 o'clock Central, noon Mountain Time, 11 Pacific time. Got it. So hope you'll all come for more to celebrate.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. Let's
Stay
make
safe.
Colorado great.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks.
Did Mary Beth leave? I
I'm
quoted
here.
her throughout my session. She said so many good things.
I know.
Mary Beth, you're still there. Thank you.